Hey guys, this is KSP with Tape, and today you join me for episode 21 of KSP Road to Exploration, and we start with rescuing a Kerbal. Yes, I occasionally take on these missions to get some free Kerbals added to my roster, so we're sending out the Ares 2 with all of the remaining fuel on Hermes Station. I'll have to refuel that this episode. It does go through fuel quite quickly, and my current fueling vehicles are quite small, although entirely reusable, so that's all good. Alright, so we're just going to send the spacecraft out to go and fetch back this Kerbal. Hopefully it's like a scientist. I have a few pilots and I think more engineers than scientists right now, so it would be good to have a scientist because, you know, scientists can reset experiments and things, which is good. We've done that a little bit on Hermes Station. But anyway, yeah, here we are heading out. We've got who's at the helm? Mitgen, one of the pilots we actually saved from space. That's where I've gotten almost all of my additional Kerbals. You don't really have to buy them unless you really need something specific. But yeah, Kerbals are expensive, so I just saved them. So yeah, we just do a little correction maneuver after lots of orbits. I don't want to use too much fuel because, well, fuel is expensive to get to space. Well, not expensive, but you know, it takes a whole launch, so I want to save as much fuel as possible. And yeah, so I'm doing multiple orbits to catch up with it and things. And we get on ourselves a nice little lunar eclipse there, and then the moon goes the other way because of various orbital mechanical things, in the fact that we're moving relative to it, which I thought looked really cool. That was one of the more interesting solar eclipses. But yes, here we are, Adam Kerman, I guess, yeah, which is cool. We never get like a Kerbal with a normal name. I mean, there's Bill and Bob and Jeb and I guess Valentina, but most of them are called like Mitgun or Shovel. Shovel, yeah, that would sound like a Kerbal name, just Shovel. But yes, Adam Kerman, hopefully he will be a better pilot than Adam Sandler is an actor. The funny thing is, Adam Sandler isn't even a terrible actor. He just does so many bad films. Anyway, I think we're getting a little sidetracked, don't you? So let's just head back to the station. I think we are, yeah, way in front of it, so we're going to have to slow down a bunch, which will just require a pro-grade burn when we get here, and then just waiting a while. As you can see, you just go through a few orbits, and then you get to your station. Basically, when you are behind something and you want to catch up with it, you need to increase your orbital period by increasing apoaps and periaps, or one or the other, and then you will have a longer orbital period, so over time you will catch up with the, you will slow down with the spacecraft, and obviously if you're behind it, then you want to, you know, pull in your orbit so you're going faster. It's kind of counterintuitive. If you want to catch up, you speed up, so you have a longer orbital period, and if you want to be caught up, you slow down. Oh no, if you want to catch up, you slow down, so that you have a slower orbital period. But yeah, space travel, crazy stuff. And then once you're in near the station, of course, you can just treat it like a normal space. To go at the station, you just fly at the station. It won't be perfect, and you do experience orbital mechanics getting in your way, but it's relatively simple. So, here we are. Just took away the solar panels because they are in a precarious position, because I actually forgot to put solar panels on this spacecraft originally, if you remember, and let's send up a little node with some solar panels on it. So anyway, I put Mitgen back in there, and our saved pilot will send him back on this Ares, probably, actually. This is another Ares 1, another crew vehicle going to the station. I have to say, maintaining this station is incredibly difficult. It takes a lot of things, and these smaller vehicles are really being problematic. I will have to work on SSTOs a little more. I did test one last episode, but I should probably actually get that in full service, because it would be rather nice to, you know, be able to go to orbit in a single stage. I've forgotten, have I got Rapier engines yet, or was it using ramjets? Because those probably won't work as an SSTO. But anyway, let's just send the first stage back, get rid of that escape tower, and head on into orbit. We will hopefully land that stage. I think I lose the footage for it though, because game crashes or something dumb, so yeah. Anyway, on to orbit. We're carrying secondary payloads again. Yes, we've got more low orbit communication satellites. I think these might be the last two I'm going to bring up, because I already have like 8 or 7, 6? Maybe 6. Maybe I'll bring up 2 more. But yeah, I do like bringing up secondary payloads. Anyway, yeah, so let's recover Ares 1, except the game was like, oh, you selected Ares 1. We'll recover Ground Com 2, which is my long-range communications thing, which means that I actually can't communicate with my distant probes at Duna and Eve right now. So I had to put out a new one, and obviously because it doesn't target something by name, it targets it by its unique identifier, which is a string of letters. It means I couldn't actually communicate, so I had to do a little save file editing to get my satellite working again, but that was a weird game glitch, so I'm blaming that. Anyway, we're just deploying our little satellites again, our low orbit communications, or LOCs. Yeah, here we go. And yeah, that'll help provide. It helps provide just general communications, and also, especially when I'm landing stages, it's quite useful. Yes, this is the 6th low orbit communication, and yes, a pretty standard rendezvous with the station, and nothing eventful really happens. So here we are, just docking with a monopropellant resupply for the station, which we will put in, but you probably don't really need to see because it's just transferring monopropellant. And we need to bring back the 2nd stage to make this a fully reusable rocket. Annoyingly, we've come in at a slightly skew-if angle, so our drag has been increased and we have landed in the mountains. But this is more the highlands than the mountains, I guess. And we do touch down fine, and when it falls over, the parachutes counter, and we are fine. And we get that back, and we get, I think, about something like 6,000-7,000 back for that, which is good. Yeah, here we are. Whenever I recover, usually the game crashes, so usually this is how I recover things. And how much do we get back? So yeah, almost 7,000 funds. Not bad for our little space program. And we can put that kind of money towards these sort of things. This little rocket is me once again launching the moon, the satellite to the moon, which I'm being paid for. Non-reusable. I tried to make a reusable tiny rocket, but it caused more problems than it was worth. So this is just a standard, cheap, expendable rocket, and it's just going to put a satellite in orbit of the moon. It might actually even be cheaper just to... oh no, it wouldn't be cheaper. I was thinking maybe it'd be cheaper to take it up on a big pulsar vehicle, because it's reusable, but I would have to take the 2nd stage out to the moon, so I wouldn't be able to get that back. So it is cheaper to just put it on this. And I tried doing it with solid rocket boosters to make it a little cheaper than it is currently, but that was just... I needed quite a few solid rocket boosters, so it turned out to actually be just as expensive. So yeah, a couple of fairings, and here's a little probe. Much improved from the last one we tried to send, which got lost because it couldn't use its RCS fuel because it was in radial tanks, and the engines don't like that. So yes, it actually has a normal monopropellant tank, and it will be able to get into the orbit of the moon, I hope, and then we will be paid handsomely, as we always are. We also have a mission to put a satellite in orbit, quite near the moon. That's that blue line. Around Kerbal, which will be fairly lucrative. I do take on these satellites every now and again because they do pay very well for a relatively simple mission. And that blue one, we can probably actually get that orbit using a lunar encounter, so it'll save a little fuel, which will be a little interesting because it's nice to do gravitational fun things, which I rarely do, because usually, like when I'm going to a planet, I wait for the transfer window and then like, should have used a gravity assist off Eve or something, and then it's too late because it's the wrong window. But anyway, maybe we will do a little of that in the future. But anyway, enough of that. Let's head on to the moon. Our 2nd stage has propelled us nicely. I think this is an old Antares launch vehicle. I used the little one. I named Antares. I used them at the in the early space program when you only have 1.25 meter parts, and this was used, I think, for many satellites. So I'm reusing an old launch vehicle, I guess. Well, reusing the old design, not actually reusing the vehicle, which would be rather nice. Anyway, just change our inclination and get ourselves into the right orbit to be paid handsomely, and well, try to get a little science, but I think we've totally got all of the science from around the moon now that we would be able to get without sending Kerbals, because when you transmit back data, obviously when it doesn't really value repeat experiments, which bit of a shame, but you know, whatever. Anyway, so I think we are in orbit, in the correct orbit now. Yes, there we go, 65,008 science for the mission. Rather nice, and we can just leave this here. It's got that interesting kind of square probe core, which I quite like. Well, I guess it's a cuboid, because a square is 2D, two-dimensional is what I was going for. And we got a mission to fly by Eve, which is convenient, because in 3 days we will be flying by Eve, and 3 days later we are flying by Eve. So yes, we'll actually hopefully be getting into orbit of Eve, although our periapse is behind Eve, which means we won't have communications, but I have a plan for that. I'm just going to use the flight computer. But anyway, yes, awesomeness, we arrive at Eve, we get the money for flying by Eve, which came just at the right time, and obviously the world first, and we're just going to drop down a little bit until we have a connection with Kerbal. And yeah, here I'm trying to spy Gilly. I think it's like a dot in the sun, but you can just see it flying past there, maybe not quite so well at 4 times time accelerate. But yeah, wait, no, I'm looking. Yeah, there was a tiny little glint there. If you look very hard, you'll be able to see it. I was very excited to see Gilly because it's just like a tiny little asteroid. And we have taken a little bit of science from high above Eve. We're going to transmit that back for glory. Rather good that we got the mission in the end, because it's far more lucrative for money than it is for science. The real science is on the surface of the planets, of course. So yeah, but anyway, it's always good to put science in, to put probes in orbit, especially because it increases my ability to communicate throughout the Kerbal system, which is rather nice. So anyway, we need to descend down to Eve now, and we need to set up a maneuver node, which you are seeing me do here. That would just throw the maneuver node in. I thought I'd have a lot more Delta V, but because I'm using radial RCS tanks and an RCS and a monopropellant engine, I can't actually use the fuel on the probe, so we are a little limited on that. But anyway, I've set up the flight computer to perform the... Well, I don't think I've actually set it up to perform it yet, but it will be. To perform the burn, so that behind Eve, that will do it for me. It means that I can pre-program things, and I won't actually have to... My phone just buzzed. It means I won't actually have to take control, which is rather nice, because I can't take control behind here. It's not super accurate, but it'll do basic maneuvers for me, which is just generally good until I expand my communications network across the Kerbal system properly. We have it pretty good in the Kerbal system. I mean, wherever you are, you're probably going to have communications with my big array of satellites now, but, you know, further out it's a little difficult. But anyway... Here we are, just, apparently we have a connection. Oh, of course we have a connection now. We're behind Eve. I was confused by that for some reason. But yes, the computer goes crazy performing that burn, shaking around a little, and then killing the rotation, and we are in orbit of Eve. And that's pretty much all we're going to be able to do for now, because we're in a 10-day orbital period. I should have brought it down, but I wasn't really thinking. I want to leave my options open. But given my limited Delta V due to... hardware failure, I guess we could call it. I just have that second stage left, so we will put ourselves in a better orbit soon, but that will be in 10 days until we reach periaps, and we have things to do in those 10 days. One of the things we have to do is launch, I believe, some fuel to the Hermes station. You can see in the alarm clock in I think like 2 days, Kestrel is nearing the periapsis of Eve, so we've laid down an alarm for that so we won't miss it, but we should be doing things while that is happening, because we have a very, very busy space program. And annoyingly, a lot of my MechJeb windows have disappeared, so I'm using the custom window editor to get my windows back. So yeah, I'm trying to figure out what the hell's going on here, and it turns out if you click this, you get your windows back, which is good. I don't know where they all went, but who knows. Anyway, so let's take off atop a Pulsar 3 vehicle. It'll be nice to get a bigger launch pad so we can build some bigger rockets, some 3.5 meter rockets, and I actually do have an idea for something that would still fit into this launch pad and would still be 2.5 meter rockets. It's the Pulsar 4, which is slightly bigger than this. It has a few more engines, well, a lot more engines, maybe even 9. But probably just like 8, and it would be much taller than this and would have around an 18-ton lifting capability and would be reusable, because well, the Pulsar 1 was my moon rocket sort of thing that used a Poodle engine, was semi-reusable and, you know, was kind of a good starting point, and the Pulsar 2 is the one that launches those Ares manned spacecraft to the station. It's quite a small rocket, but it's fully reusable, and it has about an 8-ton to orbit, I think maybe 9-ton to orbit capability. There's this, the Pulsar 3, which has, I think, in fully reusable mode, a 14 to 15 ton to orbit capability, and then the Pulsar 4, which is my conceptual rocket right now, would hopefully have 18 to 20 tons of payload to orbit capability. It's basically just refining this sort of rocket technology so that I can launch big enough things on my current second level launch pad. Yeah, I do like talking about launch vehicles, as I'm sure you've guessed. And I totally just noticed that this wasn't in 4 times time accelerate, so totally didn't do an on-the-fly edit. But yeah, it was still nice to see that ascend at normal speed. We rarely get to see that anymore, so maybe it's good that I left that in. But and it also gave me time to talk about, you know, the lifting capability. So we dropped that stage. It'll hopefully flip around as we just watch it flip a bit, so that we can land it on the ocean, and we'll just push this into orbit. This is, of course, my fully reusable Eris spacecraft. The rocket is reusable the first and second stage, and the spacecraft itself comes back in one piece, bar the nose cone and tiny little fairing up there. So yeah, it's a pretty cheap way of getting a significant amount of fuel to orbit, and that was mostly what the Pulsar 3 was designed for. Well, that and putting stations and things in orbit of Minmus. Just pretty heavy lifting capability, because the Pulsar 2 was a little bit But anyway, here we are just landing the stage. I cut through the descent. You've seen it many times, but I just like to leave in the last bit so that you can see it. And it is a semi-propulsive landing, much like nothing. It's because I guess the space shuttle boosters landed on parachutes, the Falcons land on engines. But obviously I am just a human, so it is very hard for me to land on engines entirely, so I tend to use parachutes. And it's actually lighter to use a little bit of fuel. Anyway, so here we are, just pushing on into orbit after recovering that stage and getting back around. I think it's like 19,000 funds, which is good. We've got our encounter with the station, and we will be there momentarily after, setting up the vehicle properly. Getting the second stage ready for re-entry after I've docked, and getting rid of this nose cone and fairing and things. It's just, it houses some of the control instruments, and I do the fairing before I do the nose cone, which is never a good idea because it'll get caught and very confused. But there we go. Hopefully that fairing won't smash the solar panel, and it doesn't. But anyway, after another fairly not a standard encounter, is me trying to get to the station and running out of fuel because I didn't keep the second stage attached, and I also was very dumb about my encounter. I sort of forgot how to encounter. So this is sort of dead and won't get to the station. So we send out the Ares 2 once again to save the Ares. And yeah, so I'm just going to sail on over there, dock with it, and then re-encounter the station, which has drifted quite far away, so I do a little bit of orbital ballet, which you've seen that sort of stuff before. So yeah, here we are, just getting back to the station. A bit of a shame, but that's why we keep multiple spacecraft on the station, just so we can do this sort of thing. But yeah, in future I'll make sure I keep the second stage attached while I do my rendezvous, so I have a little more fuel. We don't carry much RCS on this, but yeah, we gave it a little more from the Ares and docked it to Hermes, which will be rather glorious, and we will refuel it. We'll refuel this, the Moonlander mostly because, well, it needs fuel, and we do a lot of missions to the moon with tourists and things, and it's just generally useful. So that'll fill up the transfer tank, and then we're going to put the rest of this fuel in the Moonlander. We are going to have to send up another fuel probe because the Moonlander is pretty thirsty. So yeah, we're going to have to develop a bigger one of them at some point as well. Anyway, back to Eve. After a little bit of waiting, we're going to be at Periaps in 3 days, and there's nothing in between now and then. So we're just going to prepare our self to slow down. We have about 280 meters per second of delta V left. So I'm going to slow myself down a little bit. This is actually a very terrible burn because it puts me in a 6-hour orbit. My current predicament is when I'm close to Eve, Kerbal is turned away from me, so I don't have long-range communications. So I slowed myself down from a 10-day orbit, which means every time I come around to the near side, Kerbal will have orbited an integer number of times, so it'll be in the same position. So then I slow myself into a 1-day orbit, which means every time I get the periaps, Kerbal will have turned once, so the communications will be in the same position. So after this burn, I'll do a subsequent one to put me in a 3-hour orbit so that it alternates. So a bit foolish. I was hoping to do a little bit of ghillie science, but obviously we've had the hardware malfunction, meaning that the engine on the probe will not work. That is that has been fixed on Kestrel 3, the spacecraft heading for Moho, which is about to do its inclination change, which we will see at the end of this episode. I do have a very busy space program right now, don't I? It's yeah. Anyway, so here I'm just figuring out what I need to do, and I'm preparing to set up the flight computer. Very useful to have the flight computer. It allows me to do things when I'm in the blind, I guess is what you'd call it. And using the rest of my Delta V, I'm going to put myself in an effective orbit of Eve, which will hopefully profit us greatly. Annoyingly, I forget to tell the flight computer to do anything, so I fly right past the periaps and lose communications. So I need to set up another maneuver node and tell the flight computer what to do. It gets in position, and then I warped to periaps, and while we lose connection, the computer knows what it has to do. It needs to fire up the engine and use the last of its fuel to slow down, and then we will be able to get science from low down near Eve. Of course, earlier in the episode we got science from high up near Eve, but now we need to get it from low down. And beautiful shot with Scatterer helping. I do love how Eve looks with Scatterer. Scatterer is love, Scatterer is life. It does provide the best looking oceans and atmospheric scattering. But yeah, here we are, low down near Eve, which is going to take a few reports. And nicely, the flight computer actually tells you how long it'll be until your reports actually display, which is nice. So I'm going to take all of this, and then I'm going to send my science back, and I keep double-clicking the commands and being like, what the hell? And then I click cancel a command, and it takes time to cancel, so my commands just fill up. But yeah, that is that. We've got a bunch of science from Eve. It's really rather good. We've got a bunch of world firsts and a bunch of money. We'll hopefully do a little more stuff with Eve, but that probe's not looking good. It's pretty much out of fuel, unlike the one around Duna, which still could be doing a few things I might see what I can do. Anyway, so here we are with Kestrel 3, the spacecraft heading for Moho, the spiritual successor to the Kestrel 1 and 2, is the one that Duna and the one at Eve we just saw. This one has propulsion for itself. Its engines actually will work, which will be nice. It's also launched on the Pulsar 3, the first interplanetary vehicle launched on the Pulsar 3. But yes, the second stage burns out, and we use the fuel on the third stage, not on the third stage, on the probe, to put ourselves on our encounter with Moho. And you can see here we are going to get ourselves nice and close to it. We are just going to fly past Moho, of course. We do not have the Delta V to slow down. I might be able to one day re-encounter using gravity assists and the fuel I have left. But not for now, because we're going to be coming in at too high a velocity. I'm also not coming in at a pretty very good angle to slow myself down. It slows me down a little bit when I get there, but not a huge amount, which is a shame. And you can see here with the rest of my Delta V, which is about 100 meters a second, I wouldn't even be able to slightly slow down. But anyway, yes, that is the end of the episode. I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope you're looking forward to Moho and Eve and all of the cool things we have going on. I will see you next time.